So NBC News has obtained audio of what seems to be Nolan's friends calling for help when their boat was in trouble. Listen to this.
We're sinking. Can you all please come?
And is everybody on board in good health otherwise?
Yeah, everybody's on board.
You know, you can hear the voice. He doesn't sound panicked. He doesn't sound out of control. He sounds very calculated. There's a problem. They're trying to handle it. The other thing we now have is GPS. Tracking that boat is critical because these boys already made a statement. They already talked to family. They already talked to law enforcement. If their story does not match completely with what that boat did, then they're going to have a problem.
Well, from what I can see, it seems consistent in the idea that the boat was having problems. What is interesting is the dispatcher says, is everyone on board and in good health otherwise? And the caller says, yeah, everyone on board. First of all, everybody's on board. Nolan wasn't on board, right? And he's not fully answering the question.
Everybody's on board. That's what he told the dispatcher. Except Nolan wasn't on that boat. He didn't ask for a rescue either. He asked to get the boat unsank. Not saved, not rescued, unsank. Like whatever was happening out, there wasn't really an emergency at all. And somewhere behind them, on an island with no shelter and no way to call for help, Nolan was already running out of time. Before we go further, I need a second of your time. If this case has had you gripped the way it's had us gripped, do something small for us. Hit subscribe, tap that bell, drop a comment when you're done watching. This isn't a story we're chasing for views. It's a young man's life and a family still waiting for the truth. Every one of you watching, every one of you sharing, keeps this story from disappearing into the scroll the way so many others do. So stay with us. This part matters. Let's set the scene again, but through a new lens this time, through sound instead of sight. Because up until now, everything we've talked about has come from photos, texts, secondhand accounts, video clips shot from a distance. This is different. This is an actual recorded phone call, made in real time, while all of this was unfolding. Around 4 o'clock that afternoon, someone on the boat Nolan had been riding with picked up a phone and called a private towing company, not a rescue line, not 911, a private tow. Whoever made that call sounded calm, functional, like someone dealt with a mechanical inconvenience, not a moment where a life might be on the line. Hey, we're at the west tip of Horn, and our bilge pump stopped working. We're going. We're sinking. Can you all please come? I want to get this boat unsank and towed back. The dispatcher, doing exactly what a dispatcher should do, asked the obvious question. Is everyone on board and in good health otherwise? And the answer that came back was quick. Yeah, everybody's on board. Now hold that answer in your hand for a moment, because it's about to become the center of everything. If everybody was on board at 4 o'clock, when did Nolan stop being part of that everybody? Was he already back on the island by then? Had he already made the decision? Or had it already been made for him to stay behind? Or was that answer simply wrong? A quick, reflexive response to a stranger on the phone who didn't need the full story, just needed to know if he should send help? Let's actually slow down on what a bilge pump failure means, because most people watching this have never owned a boat and don't know what that phrase is really describing. A bilge pump is a thing quietly working on the floor of a boat, pulling out water that naturally collects there from waves, rain, or small leaks. When it stops working, the boat doesn't instantly go under. It's not a hole in the hull. It's a slow accumulation, minutes turning into more minutes, water rising gradually, while the people on board make a decision about whether to stay put or try to get somewhere safer. Which means that call wasn't made in a single panicked instant. It was made after someone had time to notice the water level, process what was happening, and decide it was serious enough to call for a tow instead of just riding it out. That detail matters, because it means there was a window where decisions were being made out on that water, at the exact same time a decision was apparently being made on the island about whether Nolan was staying or going. Two separate situations unfolding in parallel, both requiring choices, both happening without the full group in one place. Because here's what the records show next. The boat wasn't just repaired on the spot. It had to be towed, roughly 3 miles, according to the data now attached to this case. 3 miles of being pulled behind another vessel, disabled, drifting at the mercy of someone else's engine before it finally got back to normal operation and made its way to where the group had originally launched from, arriving there at 5:44 in the evening. Do the math with me. 4 o'clock, the call goes out. 5:44, the boat is back at the dock. Nearly 2 hours between the malfunction and the return. 2 hours where a group of teenagers were stuck on open water, dealing with a boat that wasn't working, while some were behind them, on an island with no shelter and no signal. Nolan was left in a place none of them could quickly get back to even if they wanted to. This is where the story shifts from suspicious to something more complicated. And complicated is almost harder to sit with than suspicious, because a broken bilge pump is mundane. It's boring. It's a kind of unglamorous mechanical failure that happens to boats all the time, and it gives an innocent explanation for why a group left the island when they say they did. If the boat really was taking on water, if they really did need a tow, then leaving wasn't abandonment. It was survival. You don't stay on a slowly sinking boat as a show of loyalty. You get to safety and you figure out the rest afterward. But here's the tension that isn't resolving no matter how many new details come out. Even if the boat story is completely true, it still doesn't explain the other half of this. It doesn't explain why Nolan wasn't with them when it happened. It doesn't explain the two conflicting versions of that final conversation. One saying he chose to stay with a girl he'd met. The other saying he told her he was heading back to the boat. A mechanical failure on the water doesn't touch that contradiction at all. It just adds a second timeline running parallel to the one nobody can agree on. And that's the uncomfortable truth about evidence in cases like this. New information doesn't always simplify things. Sometimes it just adds a new thread to follow, without cutting any of the old ones loose. There's something else worth sitting with here, something almost overlooked in all the noise around the recording itself. Listen again to what the caller said when asked if everyone was safe. Not yes, we're fine. Not yes, we're all here. Just, yeah, everybody's on board. Said fast. Said like a formality to get past, so the tow truck would come faster. And this is where we have to talk honestly about how the human brain works under stress, because it changes how we should read a line like that. When people are scared or overwhelmed or trying to sound composed on a phone call with a stranger, they don't usually give careful, deliberate answers. They give the fastest answer that gets the conversation moving forward. A quick yeah isn't automatically evasive. It can just as easily be the sound of someone who wants help to arrive faster and doesn't think a stranger on a towing hotline needs the full complicated story about a friend who stayed behind on the island. That's the frustrating part of analyzing recordings like this. Tone alone can't tell you intent. It can only tell you how someone sounded in one specific, stressful moment. Since this audio went public, the reaction online has been loud and split right down the middle, which tells you something on its own. Some people heard that exchange and immediately called it evasive, pointing to the quick pace of the answer as proof that something was being smoothed over before it could even be questioned. Others heard the exact same clip and thought it sounded completely ordinary, exactly what a stressed teenager would say to get a tow truck moving instead of trying to explain a complicated situation involving a friend he'd left behind. That split reaction matters, because it shows this case has reached a point where the evidence itself has become a mirror. People aren't just listening to the recording. They're listening to their own theory about what happened, played back to them through someone else's voice. That's the psychological trap this entire case keeps setting for anyone watching from the outside. Every recording, every text, every photo gets run through two completely different lenses depending on what you already believe. If you believe something was hidden, this call sounds like a rehearsed cover story. If you believe this was a chain of unfortunate coincidences, it sounds like exactly what it claims to be, a group of scared kids trying to get their broken boat back to shore. Both of those readings can't be fully right. And right now, nobody outside that boat knows which one actually is. What we do know is this. A grand jury is going to receive the full findings of this investigation once it's complete. That's confirmed. But convening a grand jury in a case like this is standard procedure any time a death is unexplained or contested. It is not, on its own, a sign that a crime has been confirmed. It's simply the next formal step in a system trying to work through a case that has refused to resolve itself quietly. No official autopsy results have been released. No independent findings have been made public. No one has confessed to anything. Despite what you might have seen floating around in comment sections and video titles promising a breakthrough that hasn't actually happened, what we have concretely is a recorded phone call, a timeline bill from tow records, and a family still waiting on the two things that actually matter most: a cause of death and an explanation for the hours nobody can fully account for. So let's bring this back to you, because this case keeps forcing the same kind of questions, just wrapped in new evidence each time. When you hear someone answer "everybody's on board" too quickly, does that read to you as guilt, or as the ordinary way people talk to strangers on the phone during a stressful moment? If a mechanical failure really did strand that boat for almost 2 hours, does that change how you feel about the group leaving the island without Nolan? Or does it simply explain one part of the story while leaving the rest of it just as dark? And when new evidence turns out to be mundane instead of explosive, does that make you trust the official version more? Or does it just make you wonder what hasn't surfaced yet? We're not going to sit here and tell you this call proves anything one way or the other, because it doesn't. It's a piece, one piece, in a case built entirely out of pieces that don't quite fit together yet. But every piece gets us closer to whatever the full picture actually looks like, and we're going to keep tracking every single one of them as they surface. Tell us what you think this call really reveals. Does it clear the group, or does it raise more questions than it answers? And if you want to be here the moment the next piece of evidence drops, make sure you're subscribed to 3 a.m. Files, because we'll be breaking it down before anyone else does.